I know someday, somewhere, somehow we'll share some fantasy. I know someday, somewhere, somehow we'll share some ecstasy.
Hey folks, it's Chris here in central Pennsylvania. Welcome back to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Indaba Africa channel, part of the Indaba Broadcasting Network. It is Wednesday, hump day, the 21st of July, 2021. Welcome to people around the world, wherever you may find yourselves. To those of you tuning in to listen to my conversation with Sihle Ngobese, Big Daddy Liberty, my guest is not here. I don't know if he's tied up or something happened. Let me check and see. Oh, here he comes now. Here he comes now. Okay, there we go. It worked out well. So clearly you'll see that there's been no rehearsal whatsoever in this stream because we're just getting there now. And he's sideways. It's like I'm swimming in a pool there. Can you turn it landscape?
Just a moment. Just a moment. All right. Here we go.
Well, now it's portrait, but I can see it. But are you able to do landscape or no? Are you able to turn it?
Sorry?
Are you able to turn it so it's landscape or no?
This is landscape.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's landscape.
Perfect.
Okay. Cool beans.
Right. Just give me a moment, please. I've just only gotten back from the field.
Okay. That's kind of what I figured.
All right.
There we go.
Oh, right. Well, goodness gracious me. What a day.
No doubt.
Are we on air by any chance?
We are on the air, yes. I was already
Okay,
live
well,
at
there you
10:30.
go. Sorry to keep you guys waiting.
No, it's quite all right. I played some Trevor Dongenet in the background. Trevor is a frequent guest on my program, former bass player for Johnny Clegg, and he's recorded his own album, so I promote his music. So I usually start it with that because I don't get copyright hit on that because I have his permission to use it. So no worries, no sweat. You're a busy guy. Everybody knows that. In fact, he's so busy, it's been a year since you've been on the program. Over a year.
That's right. That is right. It has been a very long time. Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Shalom, gedag. Good to be back on your show, Chris. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. Robin's here. I think Robin tried to guilt you into coming back on the program because you're so busy. And she says, my two favorite YouTubers on one stream, South African YouTubers, that is. And yes, Chris is African.
Well, there you go. There you go. Shout out to Robin.
Well, yeah, excellent. Hey, so listen, I feel kind of guilty asking you to come on. I mean, there's nothing going on in South Africa. There's no news to talk about. I mean, it's a really slow news cycle there.
So quiet, so quiet.
Oh, brother.
But,
where do we start
Chris, just give me a moment.
Yeah, that's fine.
Give me 2 seconds.
Folks,
I might cut out for a moment.
No worries, folks. Sihle he's changing clothes now, doing stripper chats, so we had to take it off camera. It's a family-oriented program, so we don't want to shock or get too many of our viewers excited. So, Erica says shalom.
There we go. I'm back. I think I'm back.
There you go. I got you now. I got you.
Perfect. All right. Now I'm comfortable. I'm on the Wi-Fi. Good to be back. All right.
Okay, let's get started. Well, let's see.
Yeah.
So a lot's happened last year since we talked, including me being deplatformed by the PooTube, who took my channel down over nonsense that wasn't even there. But we're back with a new channel. We've been back for about 3 months now, and not nearly where we were. We were trying to catch up with Big Daddy Liberty. You've done well on your channel, and I was up to 22,000 subscribers when they took my channel down, but up to almost 4,000 now, so we're trying again. I avoid talking about the former president and anything that related to the so-called medical issue going on around the world. And then that way, I stay clear.
The cough.
Yeah, the cough. That's right. Anyway, but listen, now I don't know this because I do. You're Zulu, yes, of course, correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's what I thought. But are you from KZN or are you from somewhere else?
From KwaZulu-Natal. My upbringing straddles both the township part of KZN. I'm from one of the biggest townships, the biggest township technically in the country, named Umlazi, which is just south of Durban near the old airport. And of course, I'm from rural parts of KZN too, in a place called Imapumulo. Sort of just a bit west of Stanger, very rural homestead. And that's where my farm is, actually.
All right. Well, that's the reason I ask is because the fact you're Zulu doesn't mean you grew up there. You might have grew up in Gauteng or somewhere like that. That's what I want to ask. Yeah. So, I mean, most people, they associate KZN with Zulu, and with rightly so, but Zulu live other places too. That's why I want to ask. So, I mean, I'm going to guess that, well, you're probably angry, but I'm going to guess you're probably a bit heartbroken about what's happened the past 2 weeks in your province there.
Yeah. There's two distinct things that break my heart about this. One is a function of what is happening. The other is the poor analysis around it. Let me begin with the former. When it comes to what happened, this isn't new. It's been sort of brewing since about the year 2000, when effectively the ANC began its ascendancy in that province, taking over, of course, from the political party that used to govern it, the Inkatha Freedom Party. That's the IFP, which is headed, or used to be headed, by Dr. Mangosuthu Buthelezi. So what we then began to see was a move away from very traditional Zulu nationalist notions, which are rooted in a sort of Zulu conservatism, because that's who Zulus are. We're a rather conservative lot, religiously so. Well over 98%, 99% of Zulus are ardent Christians of one denomination or the other. And those Christians' roots go all the way back, of course, to the influences of colonial days. Actually, even pre-colonial days to an extent, where a lot of mission schools, wafted into Zululand and converted a lot of Zulus into Christian mainstream or Christian orthodoxy, if I can put it that way. So to cut a long story short, it's this, so basically from about 2000, you began to see the shift where more and more Zulu individuals, or just more South African citizens who live in that part of the world, were voting for the ANC, what was then and still is the nationally ruling political party, and its roots, of course. Actually, I shouldn't say that, but it is rather dominated by a sort of Leninist Marxist iteration of communism and socialism. So you started to see that communism, that leftism, if you will, begin to waft and influence Zulu institutions of society, governance, and of course the economy. Suddenly we're no longer this economy this provincial economy that values productivity, that values industry, that values a solid education. I mean, the IFP used to be a party that disavowed the ANC's notion during the liberation years of no education before liberation. That used to be the ANC slogan, and consequently, with that notion came the idea that the struggle was all about destroying all institutions and rendering the country of apartheid ungovernable. The IFP disavowed itself from this notion completely and said, yeah, look, we abhor apartheid, but we're not going to destroy institutions, which will be critically important to build off of once we attain freedom. That was one of the key differences between the IFP and the ANC back in those days. But it was a difference which was backed by Zulus, who recognized that, the struggle, the notion of struggling against an oppressor isn't new to Zulus. We struggled against the English, had two major wars with them, lost at the last iteration, but found reconciliation to an extent with the English, even with successive kings parceling out major tracts of land to English and even Afrikaner farmers, because there was a sense of peace, if you will, that had been developed. Not perfect peace, and of course not perfect justice, if I can call it that, but there was an arrangement that had been come to which preferred peace over war. So to bring it back to where I was going, sorry, there's multiple things one can say simultaneously on this issue, assuming, of course, how much the audience knows. But let me simplify. So for me as a young Zulu, the first thing that angers me is, and at its root, were the early 2000s, when the ANC came into ascendancy in my province and began to disrupt what were historical values, cultures, and customs that Zulu individuals had been raised in, that were passed on generation to generation. Very Christian environment, very conservative culturally, and a pro-market slant. The idea that Zulus should be, the goal of being a modern Zulu should be middle class, 2 chickens in the pot and a car in every garage. These were notions that we were raised with. And they're suddenly perverted when the ANC ascended into power, where suddenly the state was seen as the most important avenue for enrichment. With the ANC, of course, introducing the notion of the crony arrangement. You only become rich if you're friends with politicians. And you just suddenly saw this explosion of this corruption of Zulu society and, again, Zulu governance into what the rest of the country looks like. So that came to a head in the violent looting and violence that we saw recently, where I think there's a lot of frustration amongst ordinary South Africans as to the state of things. Firstly, as South Africans. Secondly, as residents of KwaZulu-Natal, where that very same ANC then played on these ethnic notions to an extent, and abused them in order to mobilize mobs, marauding mobs, that then looted, destroyed, vandalized, and at the same time appropriated an anger that's genuinely there by poor Zulus over the state of things. So it was just a completely disgusting display of political exploitation on the one hand by lefties and commies who govern that part of the world and were fundamentally corrupted Zulu institutions, which are founded, by the way, also on discipline. Back in the day, something like this would be a very difficult thing to try and pull off, to whip up a mob, to attack fellow KZN residents. Now, this is not to say that that's never happened before. I'm not saying that. There's plenty of cases in history where we've seen this kind of behavior, but it was always difficult to pull it off. But seemingly now it isn't, because of just how whittled down we are and the loss of a sense of provincial identity or cultural identity in favor of these commies who whip up mobs for whatever agenda they pushed. So that was the first thing that pissed me off, that really, really irked me, to see my fellow Zulus being exploited in this way. And the second, of course, was the analysis around it. It was so shallow, again, the analysis in the mainstream media and the political elites. It was so shallow and pretty much useless, that it left a lot of people wondering how this entire thing even happened to begin with. So those are the two things that really pissed me off.
Well, that's quite a mouthful there. I wrote notes down as you talk so I can get through some of that, because people are like, well, I can't wait to see Chris and Big Daddy Liberty have a conversation. So I'm going to throw a few points out here that came up from what you said there, and thanks for that. So first, you talked about Zulus being overwhelmingly Christian, which is interesting because if not to let the cat out of the bag, but I think you've told people, I think you're Jewish, are you not?
Yeah, I'm Jewish.
Yeah, so that's that you're kind of an outlier there. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not 1%, of both Muslims and Zulu Muslims and Zulu Jews. There is a population of that, but we're in the extreme minority.
Yeah, gotcha. So, and thanks, by the way, Marika Yonka, who's keeping me updated on the score. Unfortunately, the Chiefs are ahead because they rescheduled games. That game wasn't supposed to be scheduled for right now. Anyway, but so first I want to say is that, you're right about the thing about the Zulus being overwhelmingly Christian. In fact, a fellow graduate of Ohio University, Daniel Lindley, was among the early missionaries amongst the Zulu down there. There's a bust of him at the Church of the Vow in Pietermaritzburg there.
That's
Daniel
right.
Lindley. In fact, I got a picture of that when I went back because I returned to university at Ohio University later, and people were like, who's this picture? I'm like, that's Daniel Lindley. He's a graduate here. But then the other thing is, so you point back to around 2000. That's an interesting break. And then, of course, that all gained strength with the ANC's nonsense when Zuma ascended to power, because he's also a Zulu, and that fractured the IFP. A lot of support for the IFP. It seemed to break away and fall more towards ANC than the Inkatha Freedom Party at that point.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be a really important thing. And it seems as if since that time, the influence of the Inkatha Freedom Party has been greatly diminished. And one begins to wonder if there's a chance for resurgence or not, particularly given that Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who was so influential, is so elderly now, has stepped aside. But the man's still full of vigor. But I do want to say a couple things about Mangosuthu Buthelezi and the new Amazulu king. Of course, unfortunately, Goodwill Swatini passed away recently. So one of his sons is taking over. Now, he came out about 5 days into it. I love how the press keeps saying it was 5 days. No. This started on July 8th, the actual looting and assaults and attacks on the N3, and went for 11 days before it tamped down massively. So they come out on what was really about the fifth day. He comes out the sixth day or something like that. And it's very unfortunate, the press conference he had, because he was reading the script. It looked like he was preparing, and they were feeding it live. So it made him look kind of silly. But most of us looked past that. We recognized what was happening. But when he gave his comments in English, because I don't speak Zulu, when he gave his comments in English, they were very, very measured, very clear. He called for calm. He also my inference from it was he accepted responsibility for Zulus being the primary culprits in the looting and things that are going on. He said that was leadership. I mean, he's young as a king, a new reign, but that to me, I wish it had been, in the immediate aftermath, but it was 5 days into it. Long before Ramaphosa ever came back and appeared in public, he didn't say anything until like day 8, and then day 9 he finally spoke of this topic specifically, and then finally rocks up in KZ on day 11. That's ludicrous. But what I want to say is that Mangosuthu Buthelezi and the new Amazulu king both spoke for calm, and this stuff actually reached a fever pitch after they did that. So I have grave concerns that their influence, which I think you're kind of alluding to, has been diminished greatly amongst Zulu, and that's very concerning to me and disappointing. Do you agree?
Chris, there is nothing more soul-crushing and society-corrupting than a filthy network of commies and lefties who pervert a society through a network of patronage. There is nothing more corrupting of a society than that. If you want to look at how socialist and communist dictatorships of yesteryear, particularly those of the 20th century, how they came to achieve their great prominence. The first, of course, was the ascendancy, the march to power through the use of force and violence, and of course maintaining said power and governance and rule. I shouldn't even call it governance, but rather rule through a silky, slithery network of patronage that rewards and picks winners and losers in society based on your proximity to the Politburo. And that's no different in South Africa. It's no different in South Africa. People sort of think that somehow we're immune to this, or the ANC is cut from a different cloth, even though it too is red in tooth and claw commies. And unfortunately, that wafts down at a provincial level, at a regional level, if you will, to my beloved KZN. Suddenly we don't see that same level of unity and even discipline that used to characterize it. It was the hallmarks of Zulu, of the Zulu kingdom, if you will. Because it's been so fundamentally corrupted by the patronage network. So to answer your question and to maybe agree with you, absolutely, you're correct. And we're actually beginning to see it even, and this is my charge, we're actually beginning to see it affect even the Zulu royal household itself, which is why the influence of Mangosuthu Buthelezi has been absolutely instrumental in trying to guide the family, the royal household, back to those traditional values, because it's squabbling right now as we speak. I mean, there's headline after headline of internal family squabbling, and a lot of it comes down to certain factions within that same household who want to align themselves more with the ruling elite, political elite, and the patronage that comes with that, versus those who hold the traditional line around this family being distinctly different to what the rest of quote-unquote Project South Africa is, that there is a distinct KwaZulu-Natal identity, and it's linked. It's yoked, not even linked, it's yoked to us being a kingdom. We are a kingdom. People tend to forget this today. And that's why I miss the former king, because he used to say a lot in interviews that, if you're a resident of KwaZulu-Natal, whether you're white, Indian, black, or colored, you are a citizen of his kingdom. He saw himself as your king. There was an acceptance of that diverse nature, racially, if you will, of our society. And distinct to that, the idea that we have certain values, cultures, customs, religions, and values that characterize this part of the world. And we're losing that now to this unfortunate mishmash that the ANC is embarked on. And even then, amongst that, its own mishmash, its own factional battles that it then wages and sees the province become collateral damage to. I mean, you literally have, as a final gasp, you literally have a situation where those who self-identify as Zuma, Jacob Zuma acolytes, and of course his gaggle of dependents in terms of the patronage network, they broadly call themselves as the RET faction, the Radical Economic Transformationists. These people have effectively, whether you want to call it an insurrection or sedition, it definitely isn't a coup. There was no attempt at a coup necessarily, but there is definitely an attempt to sow chaos. And in the chaos, they then take targeted strikes at certain key aspects of society and infrastructure. But in that chaos, as that final gasp I said, that factional battle is now poisoning an entire province. And effectively, we've gone back to the original ANC, which attempts to render whole areas ungovernable. That's always been their policy, and that's what we saw play out over that last week.
No, absolutely. Gosh, there's a lot there. Let me get some of the points, the highlights you talked about there. One of the things that's distressed me a lot about what's happened in the KZN over the past 20 years, and I report on this inside the intelligence community, and then afterwards when I finished and moved on to civilian life, is that it's very distressing to me that instead of aspiring to be astronauts or physicians or soldiers or policemen or businessmen or entrepreneurs or farmers or vets, young ANC members aspire to assassinate the local ward councilors so they can become a local ward councilor, so they can get their hands on the tenders, and so they can be dirty, thieving bastards. And we saw well over 100 assassinations of ANC politicians in KwaZulu-Natal in about a 4 or 5 year period there, and that's tamped down recently. But that just shows you, kind of along the lines of what you're saying, that Sihle, is that the ANC seeks to undermine achievement and accomplishment, and it's about loyalty to Latuli House, and then you profit from the patronage. What I've been telling South Africans for years, and since I started broadcasting last year, is that the ANC doesn't care about South Africans. It sure doesn't care about South Africans. It cares about cadres and its patronage network and how it can stay into power. And that's, and now that this what I consider to be a captured commission report saying that it's impossible to have municipal elections on the 27th of October because of the pandemic, that's just nonsense. If there's no election 27 October, there may never be another election in South Africa without a civil war. I mean, how can the Central African Republic, a broken, collapsed, failed state under assault by terrorists in all areas and insurrectionists and insurgent groups all over, and Somaliland successfully hold elections in the midst of a pandemic, and 28 other African countries hold elections in the midst of a pandemic, for a total of about 35 elections. But South Africa, the most prosperous, well, that's a relative term anymore, but the country with the best infrastructure, it can't do it. You can't do it. I mean, people stood in line for 9 and 13 hours to vote on the 27th of April, 1994. People are standing in line for 3 days now trying to get food in parts of KwaZulu-Natal. So how can we not have a successful election? That's very concerning. So I'll let you jump in on that, and then I'll come back with these other points.
I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, there is a definitely concerted effort by the political elites. And notice how I always refer to them as the political elites.
Exactly.
Because not all of them are found in formal politics.
No. They're in business. They're in business, they're in education, they're in all the institutions, even NGOs.
All the key institutions of society, and at the heart of what they are. At the heart of what they are, and at the heart of who they are, and at the heart of what governs them, is firstly the ANC and its whole nexus, or its axis of evil. That is the ANC, the SACP, that's the South African Communist Party, and of course the South African Congress of Trade Unions, COSATU. What I like to call, or dub, shout out to George W. In that regard, but the axis of evil in this country, because it has been their ideas that have fundamentally corrupted South African society and seen them infiltrate all aspects of South African society, so that I refer to them as a political elite, because you'll find them in academia, you'll find them in the mainstream media, and of course you'll find them in business, and I can go down the line. The point is this: it's these individuals now who, after the ANC's successful program of capturing key institutions by deploying its people into them, you're now finding a situation where an institution like the Independent Electoral Commission will, as a sham, in my view, set up a commission that aims to determine whether, the feasibility of elections in October, and come to the conclusion, surprise, surprise, that these elections are not feasible, and give it a veneer of authenticity by appointing a former constitutional judge, of course, to run it. Now, I'm not throwing any shade at the particular judge. I think he's a very competent judge and all that. But you can engineer outcomes in these commissions. I've always said this to people, like, why do you think the ANC is so adamant on commissions as opposed to the rule of law? Yep. For example, when we currently have a Zondo commission that's investigating state capture. We've had a X commission and Y commission, you go down the line. Why do you think they would rather waste oodles of state funds in these commissions than actually in an independent judiciary and an independent prosecution that can go after these people, whatever the given issue may be? Because commissions and the numerous natures of them can be doctored. You can shape them in a particular direction.
Yep.
So in this particular instance, it didn't surprise me when the news came out that this particular commission that is going to make a recommendation to the Independent Electoral Commission, the IEC, it didn't surprise me that the commission then said, well, we would recommend the postponement of elections to about February or so, because February should be totally fine. Who knows what's blocking things now? The multiple waves of a cough.
Because the last 18 months of ANC leadership in the pandemic has proven to be so effective that by February, I'm sure they'll stamp it out.
It'll be totally fine then. It'll be totally fine. And hey, in the preceding 4 months or the extra 4 months, the ANC will have bribed the F out of society into coaxing it back into supporting the party. What do you mean, Big Daddy Liberty? Well, let me be precise and specific. Is it not coincidental? That the ANC is now embarking, the ANC government particularly of Cyril Ramaphosa, is embarking on a narrative and a rhetoric assault of suggesting that what we need now as South Africans that has so much state intervention is more state intervention by way of a basic universal income grant. Basically what you Americans went through, where, the government was paying people to stay home and then being surprised that people are not working.
Well,
so now we're proposing the same thing here.
It's comical to see Ramaphosa talking about now we're going to have a basic income grant when they're not even paying the unemployment insurance fund. They're not paying SASA grants. Some of my viewers actually subsist on SASA grants. One guy has got one 350 Rand payment. That's it. Nothing. No unemployment. So if they can't pay that, they've already stolen $5.6 billion in loans from the African Development Bank in July last year, $285 million, $1 billion from the new BRICS Bank, the new development bank, the BRICS Bank, and $4.3 billion from the IMF in August. So that's $5.6 billion. The entire vaccination program, according to the ANC, would have cost 20 billion Rand at full price for the jabs from the pharmaceutical companies, and we gave them 90 billion Rand at the then exchange rate last summer. And they didn't do it. What did they do it? Where's it at? And that's not even talking about all the other stuff people talk about. The 551 million rands used to clean schools have been closed for 4 months. I could have done that for 500,000 Rand and employed 50 people and, and got it done in 3 days. That's ridiculous. Now, it just goes on and on and on, this other nonsense. Now, there's a comment from the chat, Richard Anderson, who I like to call Richard Dean Anderson. I think he's MacGyver. He said, will the people that looted the TVs be paying TV license taxes? I doubt that. I don't think that's going to happen. Also, look for Escom to have lots of load shedding, because now that there's all these ultra high definition televisions and freezers and things in houses that weren't there before, all that electricity consumption is going to crash the network. It's going to crash the grid. But now,
look,
go ahead.
Just as a quip in that regard, it's always funny to me. If you're a poor chap, and again, I'm not going to lay the blame exclusively at poverty, because not all poor people, just by nature of being poor, will then be predisposed or prone to looting when the opportunity presents itself. Sure. It is a minority of individuals that conducted the looting. The problem is that minority is a sizable number nonetheless, and can render the rule of law null and void, simply just, based on the fact that as things are, this country struggles to uphold the rule of law at the best of times.
Yeah.
But the point I want to drive at is really this. We're in a very dangerous place as South Africans, and I think more people now sense it and feel it, including those who lived in that very bubble that was controlled initially by the political elites that I speak of, specifically the elites who find themselves in the mainstream media, pardon me, who used to push a constant narrative of, the ANC's okay, it's going to recover, it's going to rebuild. Cyril, you're so fine. Cyril, you blow our mind. Go Cyril. That used to be the mainstream media, that sold us this fugazi. But I think the past week has really burst a lot of people's bubble and has introduced that notion that, for example, I and many others have been talking about, of actually South Africa requiring the faith, flag, family, and freedom type individual to take charge of the community. And you do it through a three-stage formula, excuse me. The first is unite. You definitely have to unite the people around you. Right now, if you're watching the show, as soon as this broadcast is over, get up, go to your neighbor's house if you've never met them, knock on the door and say, hey, I am so-and-so, this is my family. Can I get to know who you guys are so that I can have your back as a neighbor? And you replicate that with the neighbors all around you. You build a sense of unity, and from that unity, a common sense of purpose for everybody in that neighborhood. From that unity being phase one, you then move on to organizing. It's only once you've built a sense of unity and you know everybody around you that you're then able to be in a position where you can organize as a community. You know your neighbor, he's a lawyer. The other neighbor is a police officer. The neighbor across you is a doctor. These are all skills that your community can use if it then were to launch its own community-based structure that then has multiple skills. How many of your neighbors, for example, are armed, legal armed residents? If you then create if you try and organize a safety initiative, you know how many neighbors are armed and how you guys can do your own patrols, for example. So organizing is the second element, but you can only do it once there's unity. And the third phase, of course, is you mobilize. Once you've united everybody, once you have a sense of how you're all organized, how you can collaborate and voluntarily cooperate, you can then mobilize those neighbors into various things, whether it's a community safety initiative, a community outreach initiative to help the poorer amongst you, maybe soup kitchens, helping out with groceries or whatever the case may be. You can go down the line. Mobilizing those people becomes much easier. The point, therefore, I was getting at is the past week's actions burst a lot of people out of that bubble that often is created by the mainstream media, of course, and the political elites. And suddenly people realized the efficacy and the importance of organizing at a community level, uniting, organizing, and mobilizing themselves.
No, those are great points. Colleague Creel will be on my program tomorrow, and we're going to talk about that topic specifically. As this unfolded, a lot of people were tuning into my program and asking for advice. And of course, I caution people against vigilantism, taking the law in your own hands.
Yes, of course.
But defending your neighborhood is not vigilantism. If you're protecting your houses from people throwing Molotov cocktails at it or shooting people in your neighborhood or trying to break into your homes, that's not vigilantism. We saw Zulu communities, we saw Indian communities, we saw white Afrikaans and English-speaking communities and mixed communities band together and hold the line because this was beyond an abject failure. Now, as a former intelligence officer, I could talk for days about this, and I'll go into it briefly a little bit later on. I'm not going to touch on too much, but we're seeing the ANC talk about intelligence failures. I can't help but wonder how many people, because of course the Zuma faction with the ANC remains strong. Even before his surrender, because he wasn't arrested. He surrendered 4 days late, by the way. The fake stream, lame stream media in South Africa claiming that he surrendered was arrested. No, that's nonsense. He was supposed to turn himself in the 4th of July. He failed to do it, so he's in contempt of the court a second time by not turning himself in. Chile and the police commissioner, Sihle, had 3 days to arrest him. They failed to effect that. And after midnight, he arrives at the Escort Correctional Facility and surrenders. That's not exactly what's supposed to happen. But the media, let's get beyond that and talk about the media. So the media, there was virtually no coverage of this. The 8th of July, the 9th of July, the 10th of July, the 11th of July, the 12th of July. Newsroom Africa had some pretty courageous coverage, although some of it I had issue with, but they were at least out there. I mean, and then ENCA finally showed up when Peter Maritzburg started going on fire, and the famous thing of the dude with the stolen car stuffing a Chinese high-definition television in his boot, and the cameras come over. So that's when they finally showed up. And then SABC starts showing up. Ramaphosa is nowhere to be found. He does his address to the nation to announce that his unconstitutional lockdown is going to continue for another 2 weeks, destroying South Africa. And then at the end of it, he says, and certain rogue elements. Yeah, rogue elements within the ANC. This is a civil war inside the ANC, one that I've been predicting for years. And I told people who fell for the Ramaphoria bullshit, in December of 2017 that this guy is no different. Take a look at his history. He's not some brilliant businessman. He was handed shares and everything. If you gave me $400 million of shares in 1994 to 1999, you would have $4 billion worth of wealth today because I know how to invest. I know how to do something. He didn't invest. He just sat back and lived fat off his money and enjoyed it. He's not a brilliant businessman. He was involved with Amplatz and the Americana thing when he was deputy president. So if anyone thought it was going to be changed, I said, now, if he's serious, if he wants to have a great legacy, he has a chance because of all the frustration over state capture. If he's serious, he has a chance to root out the corruption. But the problem he faces, and I said this in early 2018 when he became president, is that he had to appoint all these Zuma stalwarts to his cabinet or he would risk he'd have a vote of no confidence and they would unseat him. So you got all these Zuma cronies that are in there and they have been, look, this state capture thing, people have not talked about it. It's worse now than it was under Zuma. Just there's no goopness around to blame. I mean, they have stolen so much money. It's unbelievable. It's crazy. But the media, completely absent. A media blackout. It was intentional. There's no way that people didn't know this was happening. It reminds me of Senecal on the 6th of October. I was the only person live streaming covering that event, and there was one ENCA reporter at Senecal on the 6th of October. Now, on the 20th, you were there. You went up and covered it, and you did great coverage, by the way. And I used some of your coverage. I think I told you about it, but if I didn't, I'm asking for use after the fact now.
No worries.
No, but I love when you ask the young lady there after all the rubbish bins have been smashed, and like, so what are you here for? Against racism. What racism? The whites, I suppose. that was so classic. So classic. Obviously, a three-piece Streetwise KFC and T-shirt recipient that was bust in. But the point is that the media wasn't there on the 6th of October. I knew it was going to be a big event. I'm here in central Pennsylvania. I covered it. Everybody showed up on the 20th because they wanted to see violence. That's what it was all about. And then Brockenfell, they ignored Brockenfell when it first started erupting. And then when the EFF had a permit to bring 100 people there and harass the students, but they brought 3,000 to 5,000 with pongas, knob carries, golf clubs, and they got water canned. Then people covered it. But the point here is the media was intentionally a media blackout. International too. Sihle, this thing, on like day 9, I did a video compilation because I was doing this all along of all these things coming in. And in the video compilation, I showed the headlines in South Africa, which were now covering the events, finally, and in the height of this thing. And then I showed all the major international media at the end, because I speak German and French and all these languages. So I showed the Washington Post, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Atlanta Citizen Journal, a Constitution Journal, and then the Telegraph in the UK, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, Le Monde, all these. And the only one of any of those newspapers on the front page of any of theirs was The Guardian, but only on the international edition. On the British, UK, and Australian edition, there was no mention of South Africa. This was an intentional media blackout. And if it wasn't for, now, it's very insidious because you heard Ramaphosa say, and people spreading misinformation. Listen, where the hell's the government at telling people what roads are shut down, where it's dangerous to go, why you can't communicate because somebody sabotaged a radio tower, why it's not safe to drink water in this municipality because it's been sabotaged. No government information whatsoever, none whatsoever, no media information whatsoever. The only thing that kept people safe and organized was social media. Yes, there were idiots that were hyperventilating and spreading rumors and spreading hysteria, but a reasonable, cogent person who can walk and chew gum at the same time can distinguish between the two even in a crisis. And that was a long one. I'll give you a chance to get in.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I often say on my channel, hashtag don't be dribbled. And, there was a lot of dribbling going on. There was a lot of, and there still is, everybody's trying to get ahead of controlling the narrative on this particular issue and obfuscating and, of course, obscuring what is observable reality. And for me, the observable reality is, of course, as you rightly said, this is an internal ANC factional battle being waged on the streets of South Africa, where ordinary South Africans are the collateral damage. But of course, no one wants to admit this, right? Because this will be relatively devastating in electoral terms. So what do you have? You have this attempt now to dribble and distract. Suddenly Ramaphosa is thrust again at the front as to being this hero. Oh, look at how he came. And he spoke to residents. And residents themselves are saying, which residents? He didn't speak to us. Business owners who are devastated in the wake of the looting, the rampant wanton destruction of private property, said he didn't speak to us as the business community who are the affected of this. If anything, he passed by here with a phalanx of at least 60 to 100 personal protection, police officers, and of course the military. And we sort of viewed him from a distance, which is ironic because during the actual looting itself, the leader of the opposition in this country, that's John Steenhuisen, he was on the ground in and amongst it, empathizing, talking to residents, collecting that data in order to then bring it to the channels that he has power in, namely Parliament, to advocate for those people. For heaven's sake, a 90-something-year-old man, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the former leader of the IFP, he was on the ground, for heaven's sake, walking and speaking to residents, even mobilizing his former party's members to form defensive blocks around certain malls in more rural parts of KwaZulu-Natal. And no one had the gumption, the bravery to ask, where in the hell is Cyril Ramaphosa right now? If anything, that very same social media you talk about, which was instrumental in giving us information, brought us the answer to that question. Cyril was safely ensconced in his 100 and something million rand mansion here in Cape Town, in the leafiest parts of Cape Town, Freycinet. Again, Freycinet itself, far from the plebs, us plebs. It's an isolated, wealthy community, and he was safely ensconced in there as Gauteng and KZN was burning. So again, I reiterate, it was these actions, the perfect storm in a sense, that have been, it's sad to say, but have been fantastic in red pilling a lot of South Africans into realizing, firstly, you're on your own, and secondly, to stave off the danger of being on your own, you've got to unite, organize, and mobilize amongst yourselves as various communities. And that's what we saw, man.
No, absolutely, and I mean, look, there's no good that comes out of this unless the ANC disappears. but ultimately, there is actually some usefulness that comes out of this. We see people banding together, people finally having the blinders lifted off their eyes and seeing what's going on here, and also the complete either complicit behavior. And I believe there's complicit behavior. By the way, there's a super chat from Citizen Guardian saying an excellent stream. Thank you, Citizen Guardian. I didn't mean that I missed that, but thank you for that. Complicit in that there are Zuma faction supporters, or at least people who support that bloc within the government, the bureaucracy, within the ruling party, within Luthuli House, who either through their inaction or their actions allow this to happen or prevented something from happening. Now, I think there's no question about that. There's complicity by the government. And people are like, why? Well, because the ANC is on knife's edge. It's been on knife's edge for several years between the radical economic transformation thugs. I always told folks, Sihle, for years, anecdotally speaking, the thing about the ANC is this, and this is probably overly generous, and today it certainly seems over generous, but I think it was true for a point. 60% of the ANC are people that were patriotic, who believed in the South African idea, the Rainbow Nation concept, the people living together, democracy, even market capitalism. And 40% were dyed-in-the-wool, communist, socialist, expropriation, nationalization, kill all the white people, chase them all out of the country, get rid of the minorities, and xenophobic. And as long as it stayed 60-40, South Africa could progress, albeit slowly. But when that balance shifted to 50-50, went the other way. And December 2017, I told people, I said, listen, it's 50-50 now. It's 50-50. And if Ramaphosa is not careful, he's going to find himself in the outs. And frankly, if members of the African National Congress in Parliament were legitimate parliamentarians and not people picked from a party list because they got 57% of the vote, that's why they get a seat in Parliament. If they actually had to run for office in direct elections and they were accountable to the voters, then if they were real patriotic South Africans, Parliament would be convening, however we have to make it happen, extraordinary measures. There would be a vote of no confidence, and Ramaphosa would be out on his ear, and the ANC would be out on his ear. And quite frankly, people who voted ANC ought to align with other parties to unseat this corrupt RICO criminal enterprise known as the African National Congress, if they were patriotic South Africans. But we know they're not. It's all about the patronage machine and keeping it going. So that's just really sad. But I mean, it drives me absolutely nuts that the media was intentionally not covering the story. And then they got it wrong. And then you notice how they parrot exactly what the government says. As soon as now I said from the outset that this was organized. People go back and watch my streams. I told people from the moment on July 8th it started, they attacked the N3, strategic feeder line of communication into Southern Africa that feeds Gauteng. It feeds all of Southern Africa from the port of Durban, and that is a critical line of communication. That was attacked. Mooi River was just obliterated. Trucks were attacked. Most of them were owned by black South Africans, by the way, that were destroyed. And then it went from there. And then people are focused on the malls being burned, and they should, but people aren't paying attention to telecommunications towers being set. 4 radio stations destroyed. Commercial radio stations who were reporting. Well, why did they take them out? Because they weren't. Anyway, so the point here is that I said from the outset, and then finally, after about 12 days, we hear Ramaphosa go, well, you know, this was an orchestrated plan. You think? Now, they're not telling us that, Big Daddy, because they've come to that realization. They're telling us that because they're using that as an excuse to root out anti-Ramaphosa factions or pro-Zuma factions. Look at everybody that's been targeted. I mean, why do you go to the Escort Correctional Facility and arrest Carl Nyhorst? By the way, we're calling him Carl Nyhorst now because the international media called him Nyhorst instead of Niehaus. But Carl, why do you arrest Carl Niehaus outside Escort on the day after the Zuma goes into the prison for violating lockdown regulations when there's 300 other people there violating? He's actually the only one wearing a mask. And you do it when it's like the Department of Justice perp walk in the U.S. People are intentionally arrested and a big show to make it look like they're guilty instead of letting themselves surrender to the court, which they're normally allowed to do. This is what they did. They carted him off like he was guilty, and they charged him 3,000 Rand, and that was the first nail. They got Zuma in, they got him. Then they went after all these other people who are Zuma supporters, and that's what's unfolding in the ANC now. It was an insurrection inside the ANC. Anyways, a real quick super chat that came, and then I want to get you a chance back on there. Moonchild just gave a 7 Rand super chat. Says, please give us your opinion on Dudu Zame's interview with Michaela Peterson. Great stream. Thanks, guys. I didn't see the interview. I don't know. Did you see that? Sihle, did you see that interview? Dudu Zame's interview with Michaela Peterson. I didn't see it.
No, but I've been tagged quite a lot by it, or from people who watched it. But I didn't. I'm not particularly interested in hearing from the political elites.
I'm not interested in hearing anybody named Zuma.
Yeah, like, and I was about to say, least of all, any Zuma at this point. I mean, these are the same people who are goading on the violence, who are instigating the violence. So I have no interest in giving such people.
You're being too harsh. I mean, listen, the young man did say that people should loot responsibly.
you know, hey man. But again, further testament to the point I'm trying to make. These are functional idiots who, by the mere lottery of birth, were born into political privilege and wealth. And now we're supposed to listen to them as if they hold some sort of sage advice or views on the country. Bullcrap. I have no interest in listening to those people. And it's kind of sad that, the international community would refer to them for commentary on the country, especially when those people, that they refer to are the very people who are instrumental in goading on the violence. So it's a little weird in that regard. But yeah, no, I mean, I think quite broadly, this is generally my takeaway, on this particular issue. There is a big debate right now between, was this planned? Was this organized? Are there men behind the curtain involved in this? And to which, in that instance, the polemics around it. Is there a coup, an insurrection, sedition, blah, 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 right? There's a whole debate around that. I've got a view, but there's a whole debate around that. But then there's the other view that I'm often hearing, including from former colleagues at the Institute of Race Relations, who don't believe necessarily that this was a coup or anything of that nature. To be honest with you, Chris, I don't really give a flying fudge in either direction. For me, it's I'm not so interested in figuring out the what as to the where to from here. Because whatever it may have been, there is a strong need now for ordinary faith, flag, family, and freedom type South Africans to rally around each other, to unite around a common purpose, a common cause, if you will, which is the defense of this country in a new iteration. I don't think Project South Africa as it is now will survive. Yeah. I don't think we'll be the current, run from Pretoria. I think the days of that South Africa are outnumbered and are short.
No, absolutely.
Because the colonial days failed to do that. Apartheid failed to run the country from Pretoria. And of course, the current ANC is failing to run the country from Pretoria. What I believe is that there still will be a South Africa, a single state called South Africa, but it will be highly federal in nature, with some regions maybe even seceding in the far future. But for now, I can foresee realistically South Africans rallying around a political project of a more federal South Africa in a more radical way, something akin to what your founding fathers of your country, brilliant men as they were, had in mind. But sadly, it's being corrupted by today's generation of your politicians. But anyway, I digress. So as a final thought, it's this. I think the ground is fertile now for a strongman politician, if you will, to be the face of it, but to have a small band of individuals devoted to that same messaging march through the institutions of South African society, the economy, business, and governance in order to change them towards this view of a more federal South Africa being beneficial, where it is that faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African, the God-fearing, law-abiding, and family-oriented South African being at the helm of controlling their destiny in their own space. And doing that right now is the political project that I think we're sitting with on our hands. So in that regard, I'm playing my part, and I'll be playing my part in this regard. I've been saying on the channel, and I've started piloting it, a campaign that I'm looking to launch that will go toe-to-toe with the politicians as they campaign also in the local government elections. A campaign I want to launch is called the Mazak campaign. Mazak being a Zulu word for build it yourself. That is what I'm now looking to hit the streets of this country, all the major byways and highways, going to Dorpi, town to town, to advocate for liberty ideas, a federal South Africa, a liberty-oriented South Africa, and a market-oriented economy. These are the three foundational ideas that I believe can rebuild this South Africa, and to inspire, hopefully, young individuals from all of these communities who take up the charge in their own space, who continue these ideas in their own space, and to maybe then for them enter into formal politics in order to prosecute this idea and to win support. And of course, direct elections will be instrumental in this regard, because you can't do it via the existing party politics and the political parties. I think we need to call for a reform even of our electoral system to allow for constituency-based elections so that we can elect directly our own representative who can even hold these sort of ideas and change South Africa. So that's what I'll be busy with, going Dorpi to Dorpi, prosecuting the battle of ideas when it comes to the Mazakele campaign, federalism, liberty, and of course a market economy on the one hand. So the advocacy work is what I'll be doing. On the other hand, showcasing, because of my show, bringing you those South Africans who are already doing this in their parts of the world, especially those who are doing it in a part of the country where there already is a failure of government, where a municipality has collapsed. And that's what I started piloting on my channel, bringing you those stories. So that'll be the dual focus of the Mazakele campaign, my contribution to realizing that sort of South Africa.
Yeah, I think I caught that on one of your recent, is it Liberty and Friends, or is it? Yeah, it's starting to feel a little left out there. I mean, you invite your friends on that program. I've never been invited, so anyway. But no. But
hey, man, the funny thing is, I've always been worried about the time zone thing.
You don't worry about that. I'm up. In my coverage shows, I get up for South Africa if I have to. So no, I'm just teasing you, but I will guilt you into get me on your program. But
absolutely, why not?
But let me. That's what I was going to ask you about the Mazakele program. So you mentioned that. We'll talk more about that maybe in another stream down the road as you get some traction and maybe bring some of the people on been success stories if you don't mind. But a couple things you talked about here. A big personality, a true leader coming forward and doing things. I'm all for that, but that's going to be tough. I mean, listen, South Africa's a gangster state when it comes to, look, Brett Kebble, I know it's been a number of years, but Brett Kebble murdered in broad daylight in Sandton City, assassinated, as tight as he was with the ANC, and he was assassinated. And then we just saw the taxi boss in Nelson Mandela Bay murdered in broad daylight. That was insane. I mean, with the gangster in chief himself, Beckett Sihle, running the country's police, this political nonsense, it's going to be tough for a leader unless he's got some serious protection to make these changes, because there will be pushback if a leader comes along and emerges that tries to change this. So that's going to be tough. But another thing is that, you mentioned that we were talking about the Zumas, and because someone asked about it. Listen, those are patronage puppies. I have no use for the children of Tokyo Sexwale. I don't have any issues with Tokyo Sexwale, but with his kids, I don't care about. I don't care about the kids of Zuma. These people are just privileged elites who don't know jack about the world, and they hold as much interest to me as the Kardashians. Unfortunately, the Kardashians and the Zumas and the Sexwales of the world hold people's attention because they're celebrities. They're not celebrities. They haven't accomplished anything in their life. I'm sorry. That's just the reality. And then the other thing I think that's important here, which I'm pretty sure, well, I know that you would agree with this, but I mean, this is important. People need to renounce the ANC's race mercantilism. Everything is always race. It's always race. How can you, in the midst of a black swan event like the pandemic, at least that's what we thought it was last year when it came out, how can you create a tourism relief fund that gets private donations and then only give it to people that are black-owned companies? I mean, that's idiocy. Do you not think that black folks work for companies that are predominantly owned by white folks or Indians or coloreds? I mean, that's asinine. That sort of stupidity needs to end. BEE needs to go away. This is such a, and by the way, since I mentioned that, foreign direct investment, remember Ramaphosa? I'm $100 billion of foreign direct investment. Dude, it's $100 billion going the other way. Everybody's going to divest. This is like 1985 all over again, but not because of sanctions, because people aren't stupid enough to put their money in South Africa. First off, you're talking about expropriating property, not land, property without compensation. So why should I put my money into investing in a plant in South Africa? Or if I'm Elon Musk and I want to put Starlink there so poor rural South Africans get broadband, satellite-based, affordable internet, but I've got to give 30% of my company to a local company because of somebody's skin color? That's idiocy.
Yeah.
Idiocy.
Yeah.
You can't survive with that kind of nonsense.
Absolutely. I mean, there's just no two ways around that. And the really shocking thing is really this. And if you don't mind, this will be my last thought, because I must prepare for my show tonight.
Same here.
We've reached a very depressing point in the country where those who really believed, who are really the ardent believers in Project South Africa, even coining it the Rainbow Nation and all of these fantastic, lofty things, are falling into a collective despair right now as they realize that actually this is not working and we can continue, right? I mean, there's a lot of positive PR at the moment. Oh, we're cleaning up the country and we're rebuilding and that stuff's all great. It's all great. Don't get me wrong. It's fantastic stuff. But unless we fundamentally change how our society is organized, how we temper political party by creating institutions and not necessarily favoring strong men. I mean, I began this bit by saying, oh, we need a strong man and a band of individuals behind him. But really, I was being facetious. What that strong man would have to do is just simply conduct a march through the institutions of society, governance, and of course the economy, in order to change them for the good. So it's not so much about the individual or that strong man, but more the institutions that endure. Because it is strong institutions that are geared towards preserving liberty and the sense of the republic, and not a democracy, but a republic. Those are the sort of institutions that endure over time and obviously will need constant refreshing every now and then. I think you Americans are finding that out the hard way. But it's the institutions that matter, damn it. And that's the one lesson I think we South Africans haven't quite learned yet. And I'm hoping this moment will present the opportunity for exactly that. So with that being said, I think, as I said, I'm definitely keen to go 10 toes down and play my part in that regard. But it's more than just about Big Daddy Liberty and, a Ramon Cabernac or, any of these other personalities on social media. It's also about you, dear South African. It requires you in your own individual space to rally those around you. And I gave that formula to work around. And, the first is to unite around a common purpose and make it as local as possible, as local as possible and as orientated towards freedoms for you as possible. So you unite those South Africans around a common purpose. Then once there's a sense of unity, you're then able to organize them into a sense of what are we trying to achieve as a community? Is it on issues of security? Is it on issues of welfare in our area? I can go down the line as to what the issues may be, but you're able to then organize those people. And once you have a sense of who's who, what's what, and what you have available to you, to then mobilize the resources that are within the community and, of course, from outside of too. No one says you can't work with your local police station, for example, or to also rope in and better coordinate with the private security guys and obviously you guys as a community, as a neighborhood watch, or whatever the case may be. The point being, those three things are fundamentally important now if we're not to only endure as a country, but also prosper.
Absolutely said. Larsalis keeps saying Tumamina, and I don't know what Tumamina means. It's not.
Tumamina is it's bullcrap. It's what the current president Cyril Ramaphosa, his ascendancy. Okay. Tumamina is basically Zulu for "send me," and that was the mantra he sold in order to whip up the fervor around him. Send me, Ramaphosa. I'll fix the nation. That's just turned to absolute crap right now.
Well, okay. Well, listen, I got to let you go because you got to prep for your program and I got to prep for my program. And I think that we should let all South Africans know, if you haven't realized this now after 27 plus years, the reality is the ANC is not loyal to South Africa. It's loyal to Luthuli House. House. It's loyal to itself, and it's everything it's done from the reorganizing of municipalities and wiping out municipalities where minority groups and other groups that weren't part of the ANC actually held mayoral positions and city councils, putting them in major metros so there was no city council anymore, thereby denying many South Africans the opportunity to serve in local government because only ANC cadre would do it then. They have deformed their democracy, and it goes from there. And just one other thing after another, the floor crossing exercise, which minority parties sought but benefited the ANC because they were clever. They've continually tried to find ways to stay in power forever, just like any political party here in the States, Democrats, Republicans, Tories, or Labor in the UK. It really doesn't matter. CDU in Germany versus the SPD. So Big Daddy Liberty, I don't speak Zulu, but I do speak some of the language. So I'll say "Ke leboha" and bye donkey. Thanks a lot. It's great having you on, and I'm going to guilt you in to get me on the Liberty and Friends. I want to get on that.
Yeah, why not? Why not even this Sunday? Because I don't know if I should call him stupid or brave lefty has volunteered to come on, and I was like, well, man, you're more than welcome to be a part of that particular panel. So if you're keen, Chris, then I'm more than happy to have you be a part of the panel this weekend, this Sunday.
All right. Well, I'll be traveling to Atlanta for the Rugby Conference Championship. But what I'll do is you're on is it 7 you come on? Is that your time, or what time you come on?
It's 8 p.m. on Sunday, which will be 4 p.m. on your side, I think, if you're on the East Coast.
No, it's 2. So it's 2 p.m. But
2. There we go.
Yeah. What I can try to do is see if I can hang out at the hotel. Go ahead and pencil me in. Send me a link. And if I have to beg off, I'll let you know, okay?
Perfect. Perfect.
Cool beans. I'm going to have a hard time being silent with the lefty there.
Yeah, I was about to say. But yeah, Chris, thank you so much for having me on.
It's my pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, Sihle Ngobese, Big Daddy Liberty. If you don't know who he is, I'd be shocked. Thanks a lot, brother.
Thanks, man.
Cheers. All right, I'll let him drop off, and then we'll wrap up, and we'll get talked about what's going on here today. Can he get out there? Okay, he's there. Thanks a lot. My thanks to Big Daddy Liberty, everybody tuning in. Thank you for the super chats from Assistant Guardian. And who was the other one from there? I got to take a peek real quick, a gander, because it's escaped me right now who did it, the other super chat. Give me a second there. That was Moonchild. Moonchild did the other one. And did Drunken Yoda do one, or is that from last night? Let me look and see. I think it's from last night. Yeah. So Moonchild gave one, and we answered your question. And then Citizen Guardian, thank you both for that super chat. And thank you all. Smash the like button, folks. 130 people still here. 124 likes. You can do better than that. Who doesn't like Big Daddy Liberty? Only leftists don't like Big Daddy Liberty. And that's because they're not right in the head. Janet Liddy says, very interesting. I'm learning a lot. Well, Janet, it's a pleasure to have you back. I saw you come on the other day with Dean Chansey, so thanks for coming on. Yeah, no, there's a lot to learn about South Africa. It's a very complicated place, but there's an awful lot of nonsense spoken about it too, particularly about its political leaders and its elites. The thing is in life is, folks, when elites say things, you need to step back and, okay, now why are they saying that? For instance, when we see Warren Buffett tell people that his secretary pays less or pays more in taxes than he does, you go, wait a second, how can your secretary pay more in taxes than you do. You pay her $170,000 a year. So let's say she pays $40,000 a year in taxes, but she doesn't. Let's say she does. You made $600 million last year. You paid $113 million in taxes. Well, he's misleading you by saying that she pays a higher percentage. Well, that's your fault, Buffett. You want to pay more taxes? You pay more taxes. So you got to question elites. Anyway, folks, I'll be back on here in about 20 minutes with the Indaba Africa News Today. So please tune back in to catch the news today. We'll give you updated what's happening in South Africa and around Africa, with a big focus in South Africa because the events unfolding there. Busy day for me. We have Big Daddy Liberty finally back on the program. It was exciting to have him back on. My deep gratitude to him to get him on here. He's a brilliant guy, and it's nice to have him back on the channel once again. So that was great. I'll be doing the news. After the news, I attend a press conference for Rugby Atlanta, who plays a conference final this weekend. And then after that, I'll be interviewing 4 Rugby Atlanta players. After that, I'll be on Ronaldo Khos program. Late start tonight, 9 p.m. South Africa time. So tune in and catch Wednesdays with the Colonel on Ronaldo at 9 p.m. After that, if I'm not knackered, I'll do a night owl stream. And then I've got the news tonight. So anyway, tomorrow I'll be interviewing Ram, who is one of the people organizing the Worldwide Rally for Freedom and Democracy in South Africa. He'll be on my program tomorrow. I'll get that time and everything posted later. And then also tomorrow is Kali Creel from AfriForum and Solidarity. Kali Creel will be my guest tomorrow, and we'll talk about community defense and things like that, as well as the political situation in South Africa. And then on Friday, Dr. Peter Groenewald from the Freedom Front Plus. Next week on Tuesday, I'll be on Joe Emilio's program. I think that'll be at 8 p.m. South Africa time. But before that, Mark Oppenheimer, the constitutional attorney, will be on my channel. And so we're working on Derek Hugard, former Springbok, on the channel, as well as Ian Cameron next week on Thursday, most likely, the firearm expert in South Africa. So there you go, folks. That's quite a pace. Yeah, and I only covered about half the stuff I'm doing. Moonchild says you're a machine. Well, I'm trying to deliver content that keeps my audience interested and informed. I promise to do these sorts of things as long as the lockdown continued. It seems to show no signs of abating. So I'll just keep aging in front of you. Anyway, thank you so much, Cameron. You sent me a voice note. I'll try to check it out. Hendo, what I'll be doing is interviewing him tomorrow, and then I'll be compiling footage and reporting on it. Won't be able to live stream because I won't be near my main computer over the weekend. So thanks a lot, folks. And once again, my thanks to Big Daddy Liberty. Always a pleasure to have a conversation with him. He's awesome, awesome, awesome. Anyway, spread the word about the lineup and about the guests coming, and smash the like button. 130 likes. Somebody can do better than that. Thank you all so much. I'll be back on the channel in about 16 minutes. Thanks a lot for your support. Hey, Big Daddy. Awesome to have you back on. As Big Daddy Liberty says, never trust a commie. As Chris Wyatt says, never trust a Democrat. Not a whole lot of space between them. I'm just saying. Take care, folks. See you shortly.